year one for Mark Madsen at Cal, the last year in the Pac-12. They go 13-19, but there were definitely flashes in the Pac-12. 9-8 in the conference play before losing their last 4 games. You lose Jalen Tyson in the NBA. Fardaws Imac is gone. Jalen Cone is gone. Jalen Celestine is gone. But you bring in some interesting pieces as you head over to the ACC. Big on Stojakovic. Jovan Blackshear from Grand Canyon is a guy that played at a super high level earlier in his college career. And Matty Sissoko from Michigan State played some winning basketball there. But the rest is a little up in the air. Christian and Nick here with Don Shennum, who covers Cal for California.com. Don, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, as Mark Madsen and Cal head to ACC this season, give us a reason to be optimistic that this won't be one of the, a bottom 5 team in the league.
Well, so when Fox took over, when Mark Madsen took over last year from Fox, right, there was coming off a 3-win season the year before. So last year getting to, even if it was only 13 wins, was a huge improvement. They were interesting. And there were flashes of brilliance. So Tyson, when he was recruited he had offers from everybody else in the world, and he was a good player, but last year really elevated him to a first-round draft prospect, going to the Cavaliers eventually. So the coaching and the inventiveness and the play sets were at a very, very high level, NBA level, right? With Madsen with his NBA background. As a basketball geek, I loved breaking down the film and showing, how the 3-man action is happening on one side to free up the weak side for the eventual kick, dish, and basket. He instills discipline and really has a team executing at a high level. I'm excited about Jovan Blackshear. He's the one who's going to pop off the screen in November. 5'11" guard, all WAC, all world for 2 years, but then a knee injury derailed him for the last year and a half. Transfers in as a grad transfer. He's got 1 year, slightly undersized at 5'11". All the film and all of the notes coming out of the early practices are he is the guy to be watching early in the year. I don't think he's going to be the guy by the end of the year. Madsen brought in 11 new scholarship players. As you mentioned, a lot of those top performers from last year are gone. So with the 11 new scholarship players, the challenge is going to be how to find minutes. 13 players deserve playing time, but how do you split up the 200 minutes out of those 13? Blackshear's going to be the guy to watch early in the year. I'm intrigued. Mr. Sissoko, you mentioned, obviously, Stojakovic is the name. I'm intrigued by Joshua Ola-Joseph out of Minnesota. His splits are really comparable to Tyson. Limited minutes last year, but he's a 50-40, only 75% shooter from the free throw line. Ola-Joseph is the one if I'm picking a dark horse to be that breakout person like Tyson was last year, it's Ola-Joseph, transfer in from Minnesota.
I love to hear that about Blackshear, because this was a guy when healthy was the WAC player of the year 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, it was sick seeing a WAC player of the year come off the bench for Grand Canyon last season. So I'm happy to hear that he's doing really well, because I'm in his corner. Back to Mark Madsen, the guy just wins. He's on an upward trajectory. Year after year, Utah Valley, they got better and better and better. And, I mean, like you said, they went from 3-29 to 13-19 last year and over 150 KenPom spots in 1 year. That is massive. Another guy I'm excited about is B.J. Omot. And I heard he's going to be pretty solid coming over from North Dakota. Him and Ryan Pietrus from Air Force.
Right.
It seems like they'll be pretty interchangeable. What can you tell us about those two guys, and what can we expect from them?
So Petraeus is getting called in the practices as a Swiss Army knife. He does a little bit of everything. Guard forward position, can dribble drive. I see him as being honestly, I think him and Stojakovic are almost clones of each other in many ways. Stojakovic has a slightly better resume coming out of high school as the McDonald's All-American, but they're similar sized. They have a similar skill set. Petraeus has actually put up the numbers more than Stojakovic has so far. Stojakovic, I think, was underutilized by Jared Haas at Stanford last year. But he's been described as Swiss Army knife. I see him actually being a little more inside Petraeus than potentially outside early on. And Omot's an interesting one. I'm interested. I'm a Summit League follower too. I've got ties back to the Midwest and Upper Midwest, Nebraska, the Mavericks, go Mavs. So Omot's an interesting one to me. I want to see if it translates well to a P5 level. That's my one concern about him. Blackshear, I'm not so concerned about to that transition from Grand Canyon because his stats pop up a little more. Omot's got the body. He's got the skills. I'm not quite convinced until I see it that's going to translate to ACC level play. I don't have the same concern with Sissoko. limited minutes with Michigan State last year. I love his footwork. I am excited about the pick and roll. So Blackshear is the 1-point guard who's a score first point guard. Christian Tucker, transferring from UT San Antonio, is a dish first point guard. He's also a senior transfer who I'm going to love watching the pick and rolls with Christian Tucker maybe as that second point guard with Sissoko. It's just it looks like a match made in heaven when I look at the film from both of them last year.
So Mark Madsen at Utah Valley, in 4 years at Utah Valley, they went 11 wins, 20 wins, 28 wins, and that defense crept up from 215th both the first 2 years to 87th to 29th, and fourth in block percentage. Like that defense was crazy good that last year. And last year, Cal was 126 offense, 139 defense. Do you expect defensively this team to? I mean, Madsen is a defensive-minded guy. Like you complimented his offensive sets, but I assume that he knows that the fastest track to getting Cal up is likely going to be on the defensive end, keeping them in games. Am I correct in that assumption? And then two, kind of parlaying this, similar to the Utah Valley teams he played were huge, right? And Sissoko is not Aziz now at Cincinnati. He's not that big, but he's still a guy that can really protect the rim. And then Blackshear is obviously small, but everyone else in the starting lineup is at least 6'6". So
it's not quite Villanova interchangeable parts basketball with 5, but you got a ton of those guys who are that 6'7" to 6'9" range who can play. That is actually a concern. Defensively, last year we weren't great. As good as Amac was last year, he was not a defensive force down low. He could be bullied around and pushed around a little bit. Omat's got a little bit more of that, big body in the paint field than Sissoko does at this point. So it'll be interesting to see. I like Sissoko's footwork a little better, but I like Omat's physical presence a little bit better on the interior. That's a concern for us who have been watching Cal is can he get those defensive numbers back up, because they were bullied inside. The third and fourth string centers, carryovers from last year, Devin Curtis and Gus Larson, early film this year, as they both have added some weight and bulked up because they're both string beans in the inside. So I know that's been a focus off season. I want to see it translated onto the court. But that is a focus of better defensive rebounding numbers and better interior presence. Last year, for instance, Amac, who was all world coming in, supposedly was going to be this force, was pushed around way too much by lower tier schools. I know it's a need that they're coaching this year to improve that defensive presence. So when Madsen got hired, I predicted a 3-year arc of 14 wins, 18 wins, and then 20 wins. Last year they got to 13, so I was 1 game off. I'm hoping this year we get to 18 wins and are interesting, and NIT, maybe NCAA fringe bubble. But with such a turnover of 11 new scholarship players, I don't think it's going to gel immediately. So I'm hoping for interesting and middle of the pack ACC play. And next year with some of these carryover players, that's, I think, the breakthrough year.
There's another player we haven't talked about yet. I love SoCon basketball, so I'm probably a little overly high on this guy as it is. But DJ Campbell, 41% from 3 from Western Carolina, average 12 a game. Do you expect him to have a big role at all this season with Cal?
I just know how he fits in. As I'm looking at the position breakdowns, is he a point because he's slightly undersized at 6'2"? And we were just talking about it minutes ago, or is he more of a off guard? But you've got Petratus, Stojakovic, and some of those 6'7" guys who kind of play or naturally slide into that off guard. So yeah, I love what I've seen about him and broken down, and he's getting a really good dog mentality feedback on the early practices. But I'm just not sure how he fits in. Again, 11 new scholarship players. I'm not sure how Campbell fits into the rotation. Because I don't see him as a third or fourth point guard quite yet, and he's slightly undersized to be that number 2 guard, number 3, wing kind of player. So I'm hoping it works. I'm hoping it fits in for him. But it's limited minutes, and I'm not sure where he ends up on that pecking order.
He shot 41% from deep. Nick, tell me. I know you're the Southern guy. Tell me wrong. Didn't Woolbright? They had like a 6'5" kind of point guard at Western Carolina.
Yeah,
so I think
Woolbright did it all for us. He was setting it up all the time. Yeah.
So there's potentially he could definitely play off the guard, and obviously shooting
spot up shooter kind of role. Okay.
Yeah. So if he can shoot that would be huge. And then I'm looking at Christian Tucker coming over from UTSA. Average 5 assists a game. I assume he'll slot in as that backup point guard.
On paper I would think he might be the first point guard as the assist first guy versus the scoring Blackshear score first guy. But the feedback so far on Blackshear is out of this world. I see him as, like I said, those pick and rolls that I see coming with the Sissoko or Omat or even Lee Dort. from Vanderbilt with Tucker. I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. I see him as a 1B point guard to probably Blackshear's 1A at the beginning of the season.
Let's dig a little bit more into Stojakovic. Can you tell us about how it came about of him coming to Cal, coming over from Stanford? Because you mentioned last year at Stanford, I mean, that program was a mess essentially, but Stojakovic would come in for like 20 minutes and would be such a smooth operator offensively. Like he missed a lot of shots. Like he definitely could have shot 41% from the field, 33% from deep. But the talent is just eye popping. His ability to create for himself and his size at his position. He's a very smart player. He takes good care of the basketball. I assume those efficiency numbers will go up, but I guess was there a pitch to him of like, you can come here and like get to the league like in 1 year, like you can be our leading scorer. You're going to have the ball a lot. Is that kind of how it went? And also, is there any connection to Madsen's ties at Stanford that got him? Did he just want to stay in California? Or I guess tell us more about Stojakovic.
Stojakovic, right? Peja and family are up outside of Sacramento as a family. I know one of the pitches coming to Stanford is they wanted to stay in the area, right? So, less than an hour, 2 hours away from home. I remember at that Stanford game last year, I'm up on press row watching it, and Peja's hanging out in the tunnel, watching the game and getting a feel for the crowd. And Cal turned out last year, just like with game day that was just here for football. When it's interesting and it's good, the fans show up. And last year, the team was finally interesting and good. And it was, of course, Stanford, the Bay Area rival. So I personally think it's not so much the college connection. I think it's probably the backdoor Madsen and Peja connection through the ties that they have with the Lakers that probably sealed the deal, and keeping Peja close to home. Right, so Madsen was hired after Peja was already signed with Jared Hassan at Stanford. In my head, I think that if Madsen was around 6 months earlier, Stojakovic may have came to Cal instead of signing that initially with Stanford. Again, the goal I know with that family was to keep him in the area and the region. I like Jared Haas as a player, right? He played for 1 year for Cal before going over to Kansas. I'm actually kind of disappointed, even if it is our bitter rival, that it didn't work out for him, because I wanted him to succeed. I think it's more interesting when your rival is good. But he just didn't manage that roster well, didn't quite know how to manage the minutes amongst all the players. Kyle Smith, who's down there now, kind of scares me a little bit coming out of Washington State. But yeah, for Stojakovic, I think it's more the lines of keeping in the area, and the Madsen Stojakovic, I'm going to say NBA connections is what kind of sealed that deal to keep him here.
But do you think there was a pitch of like, does he think he's going to the league next year? Like, does he think he's going to lead this team in scoring? Like he exudes confidence on the court. So I'm just curious what the kid's like.
I don't think so, considering how many players new have come in who probably have a similar pitch. Like Sissoko is a 1 year player, was underutilized a little bit in Michigan State, was not the alpha dog up there at Michigan State, but he potentially has the potential, maybe if he has a breakout year, to at least get some looks from the NBA level. I think Stojakovic is 2 years away from that. I don't think this year is we're going to make it big and we're going to get on the NBA radar. To me, it's a 2 year thing with Stojakovic.
Nick, you got anything else for Cal?
Nothing personnel wise. I guess my only last question is, and it's kind of broad, is just the move from the Pac-12 to the ACC for you. What does that mean for you? And are you more excited because you're in the ACC now, or just, give us your opinion on that?
It's really weird to think that, like, instead of like seeing same old Tommy Lloyd in Arizona or Dana Altman in Oregon, it's going to be, where I'm talking about Duke and North Carolina. That's kind of a learning curve for me in my head. And as we've gone through this football season this first year, the fact that Miami and Cal, right, and game day came out, it's a different world. We knew, kind of as the writing community, that this move will get us more national exposure and more national interest. We had no, I think, it's idea that it would be this meaningful, I'll say. I'm excited about the ACC. I'm excited about talking about Duke and North Carolina, even if they're both road games this year. It's, the click that like Notre Dame is a basketball conference member. It's just like my light bulb moment earlier this week was like, oh yeah, I got to really start paying attention to Notre Dame basketball now for the first time ever. And that's going to be a thing going forward. So we're excited about it. We're finally starting to realize through what's happening with football up to this point, kind of what it means to be on the national stage. I think it's interesting. for soccer, right? So UNC and Duke are out here in the Bay Area for doubleheader soccer. National elite programs coming. So all of this is really, I think, turned us into more of a national voice and a national player, and it's just more interesting for us. I think, obviously the East Coast is seeing West Coast sports for the first time in some of these time slots they've never seen before. So we're excited. I'm excited. This is working out better than I thought it would 2 months ago.
Well, appreciate you coming on, Don. I think, it's an interesting time for Cal making this move, but we know Madsen's a good coach. You definitely have some interesting pieces. People are going to have to lose games in this conference, but Nick and I both think Cal can be outside the bottom of the league and can be trending in the right direction.
Well, like I said, I'm hoping for middle of the pack and being interesting. I'd love to go 8-3 out of conference and right around 10-10 in conference. And just that's kind of my goal for the year. That's my line. Some people are a little more optimistic than I am, but I think that's where I'm kind of aiming at: 8-3 out of conference and 10-10 in conference.
And that would definitely be a success, for sure.
Exactly.
So, appreciate you coming on, Don. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.